There we go. All right. So, um, welcome to the last March class of the 2021 spring semester. So, hopefully, again, I want to hold my hands up and say I'm sorry. So, for not uploading the YouTube page, stuff came up this weekend, family health stuff just did not work out. So, I'm going to try and get that done tonight. Also, for those of you who missed the announcement, your legal analyses are due on Sunday. So, please make sure that if you have any questions, please let me know. I know that I've already gotten a question or two. I've not had the opportunity to respond to yet, and for that, I apologize. Again, that'll hopefully be done tonight. If you want virtual office hours, again, let me know so we can make sure that you are set up for the best possible chance of success for your rewrite. All right, so kind of want to keep on moving forward with, sorry, our discussion about copyright. And we've already talked a little bit about what rights you get as a copyright holder, right? You have this grand little thing called a copyright. Hopefully, if you have any interest in it, you shelled out the $75 or whatever it calls, or what it actually is to register it, so you can actually enforce those rights. And you kind of have an understanding as to how long it lasts, right? You know, it's going to be for your life plus 70 years. Now, in the Copyright Act, this is not something that we just kind of have invented as, you know, natural extension of copyright. It actually lists the rights that you get when you obtain a copyright. And one of those, we've already talked about a few of them, right? Actually limiting how many copies can be made. You get the ability to, first point of sale, distribute it as you see fit. That's why you have retailers with exclusive licensing agreements, exclusive distribution agreements with various content creators. Now, there are some limitations on that. It's just, it's way too complicated to get into for the sake of this class. Now, the other thing that you get is you get the ability to restrict or even eliminate the ability for individuals to display or perform your work. Now, these two things are mutually exclusive. So you're going to have display versus perform. Display is for passive showing of something that is static. Okay, so look at this one in more of a, I'm sorry, it's actually going to be recorded, perform as like a recorded display of a pre-existing work. So let me give you an example. A painting. When an art gallery displays a painting and they charge people money for it to come in and see it, they're displaying it, right? It is a passive thing. You come in and you view it at your leisure. Nobody's doing it live. Same goes for movies or television shows, right? They are being displayed to a group of people. One really interesting caveat with this is Google Images and hyperlinks do not constitute display. So if I'm Google and I don't have the copyright to any of the things on Google Images, a Supreme Court ruling at the end of the 1990s, early 2000s determined that that display, right, that kind of preview that comes with posting a hyperlink or posting something on Google Images is not in and of itself display, and therefore Google can do that as much as they want to. Now, the websites that are actually hosting the material need to have copyright, need to have a copyright interest or at least some sort of license agreement in order to do it. Now, perform is a little bit different. Perform is the right to perform copyrighted work publicly. Now, for here, and this goes for both display and perform, this is all going to be display or perform to the public. It is not a small group of friends. So for example, if I have a piece of art in my living room at home and I have a copyright interest in that, right? I've purchased it, it is mine, I own that individual copy of something. If I invite people over to say, hey, come look at my new piece of fancy art, that's not going to violate the original owner's right of performance, right of display, right of anything. because it's for individuals. It's for, a small group of family and friends. Where it gets a little bit dicier is things like television and movie and sports broadcasting. The NFL, for example, actually, I talk about sports too much. Let's take it outside of that. Let's say something like Bridgerton on Netflix, which I've not seen, but seems to be interesting. You have Bridgerton is something where Netflix has the right to perform or in this case, perform and display it in a way in which they see fit. And so they can restrict public showings of Bridgerton. If I have a couple of people over and it's the finale and we all want to get together and we want to watch it, that is fine. Okay. That is perfectly okay. Doesn't mean that I have to pay Netflix an additional performance or additional display fee. However, if I am performing it or playing it to the public and giving the public the ability to come in and see it, well, all of a sudden I need to get special permission, a special license from Netflix or the content creator in order to do that. And this is one of the things I find really interesting, and where a lot of people get into trouble. If you go into a bar and they're playing Netflix, like I was at 1618 downtown, downtown Greensboro a couple of weeks ago, and playing the Great British Bake Off. The TV, just like on Netflix, just letting it go. And because I'm annoying like this, I was telling my wife, I was like, that's probably legal. Now, is anybody come in and actually get mad at this little this little restaurant in Greensboro, North Carolina for doing it? No, but it is going to be illegal in all likelihood, because just because you have a Netflix password and just have a Netflix account doesn't mean you get to display it to the public, because there's an economic interest that derives from 1618 downtown because of Netflix. It adds to the atmosphere. It gives people something to watch, so they stay longer. Maybe they order another drink or another appetizer. That's what it's really trying to stop. You'll also see, especially when it comes to sports bars, oftentimes places like Buffalo Wild Wings and Char Bar, which is over near where I live, you'll have dozens and dozens of TVs all playing probably the same sporting event. In that situation, those cable fees are probably going to be in the thousands of dollars a month. It's not going to be the $150 that everybody else pays to Spectrum. They're going to have to pay an additional fee to get the ability to display and perform those copyrighted broadcasts to the public. And so you always want to be on the lookout for that. That if you own a copyright, you can restrict how often it is shown to the public. If you are running a film festival, if you are running a restaurant, if you are doing all these sorts of things, and just because you own a copy of the DVD doesn't mean a whole lot. If you want to try and show it to the public, you have to get a special and distinct license for it. So the next thing I want to talk about is the ability to license. License is essentially when an individual is able to give permission for somebody else to use their copyrighted work without actually selling it, okay? So, let's say I have a song. A really good example is a song. I have one of two ways in which I can monetize my creation. I can either sell the copyright and say, look, record studio, somebody else, Michael Jackson, who owned the Beatles catalog for a while, I'm going to turn over my rights. It is essentially the same thing as selling a piece of property, like a house. I sell the house, somebody else has the house, I lose my rights to go to the house, okay? That is how a sale of copyright works. A license is different. A license is like subletting it, or giving somebody the ability to use your copyrighted material. So an artist, a musical artist, can license a song to be used in a commercial or a movie or to be performed on the radio, whatever it happens to be. And that is, it's non-exclusive usually. It is something where I don't lose ownership rights, but I give somebody else the ability to utilize one of my rights, the right to perform, the right to copy, the right to distribute. Additionally, one of the rights that comes with the ability to license is the ability to not license. There is no requirement that you give somebody else the rights to your material. even if they're paying a fair market value. It is within your rights to say, no, I want to hold it to myself. I want to not do that at all. And that's what Calvin and Hobbes, that's why I have Calvin and Hobbes up here. Calvin and Hobbes, Bill Watterson, the guy who created it, was like famous for not licensing his stuff. You know, there wasn't a Calvin and Hobbes video game or T-shirts very often. You wouldn't have Calvin and Hobbes animated movie, which I'm sure that they have tried to make, considering how popular Calvin and Hobbes is. And so it is the ability to use or the ability to not use as the content creator sees fit. However, there is one exception to this that we'll see, and it comes in the form of compulsory licenses to music. So let's look at that. So compulsory license is only something that applies to music, okay? We are not talking about film. We are not talking about television. We are not talking about dance. We're not talking about architecture. This is solely recorded music. And originally, recorded music was not considered to be copyrightable. It wasn't actually until 1975 that anything other than the underlying sheet music was considered to be copyrightable. So, you know, the actual, like when Taylor Swift records a song, Taylor Swift gets two distinct copyrights here. She gets both the copyright to the underlying material, which is the sheet music and the lyrics. She also gets a copyright interest in the musical recording itself. So when she records "Shake It Out," for example, she gets the actual recording of the actual recording has its own separate copyright as well. But that was a relatively recent change. So in 1975, when they updated the Copyright Act, there was a sort of compromise made here where it said, okay, we're going to give the rights of copyright, where we're going to give copyright protection to the actual recordings and take it beyond simply what was written down. However, when you write a song and when you write lyrics, you have to let somebody else take that sheet music, take that lyric, and record their own version of it. They don't get rights in the actual recording, so like the actual original, but you do have to give them the actual ability to record their own version. It's called a compulsory license, as I mentioned earlier. It allows for the existence of cover bands, and the requirements are also a little bit different in so much that you have to do two things. Number one, you're not allowed to change the fundamental character and nature of the work. So you have to keep the basic melody, you have to keep the lyrics, right? You can't just like take one little thing and completely change it, which is why we're not talking about sampling. We'll talk about sampling a little bit later on in either this class or next class, but we're not talking about sampling. We're talking about a separate cover version of the song. So something like, I don't know, like the song Hallelujah, which has been covered a million times by a million different people to the point where I don't even know who wrote it originally. I'm sure somebody does, but I don't. That is an example of a compulsory license because anybody can make their own version of Hallelujah. But if I do my own like rap version of it, that might be a little bit different. So I want you guys to listen to a song, and I'm not sure if anybody's going to understand what the song is. I certainly hope so. Oh, never mind. It's showing already. So listen to it, and what I want you guys to think is that does this, with what Ben, the lead singer of Death for Cutie, is what he is doing, is that changing the fundamental character of the underlying work from Avril Lavigne? So let's listen, and I want you guys to weigh in if you have a strong opinion about it.
You guys can do it as if you like it. I'm just doing this for myself. Chill out, what you know. Let's see, that's a serious song. I love you the way you are when we're driving in the car and you're talking to me one-on-one. Then you become somebody else, not everyone else. You're watching your back like you can't relax. You're trying to be cool, you look like a fool to me. Tell me, why'd you have to go and make things so complicated? I see the way you're acting like you're somebody else gets me frustrated. Life's like this, you and you fall and you crawl and you break and you take what you get and you turn it into honesty and promise me you're never gonna find you faking.
Okay, so a little bit, but I like it. Does anybody think that that fundamentally changes the character and nature of the work? Or is it the same thing, right? Essentially just a cover version, its own, own re-recording of Avril Lavigne's underlying sheet music and lyrics.
What would change it? Like, it just, to me, it just sounded like a cover, but I never heard the original song, so I don't know what would constitute a change outside of maybe him laughing at the beginning.
First off, I appreciate you making me feel very, very old just then. That was very nice of you. And that's the question, right? Avril Lavigne, if you do listen to the original, it holds a very special place in my life because it was a middle school dance song, because that's my era. And I'm just now realizing that you guys probably weren't talking when this song came out, but that's neither here nor there. It's a serious song in her Canadian punk rock sort of way. Ben Gibbard maybe doesn't take it quite as seriously when he's laughing about it. And so the question becomes, does it change the nature when you're laughing about it as opposed to performing it seriously? But from a musical standpoint, it's the same, right? The same chord progression, the same lyrics. Now, again, you don't have to duplicate the actual song. You just have to not fundamentally change the nature and character of the underlying work, the underlying composition. So the original song was electric guitars and drums. This is acoustic guitar. That's fine. But again, if he started rapping it, or he only used a part of it, or substantially changed the lyrics and made it political song, that would change the fundamental character and nature of the work. The other thing that probably would consider changing the fundamental character of the work is there are acoustic folk versions of rap songs, which is its own playlist on my Spotify, which I really enjoy. I've oftentimes wondered, does that count as changing the character of the work, or is it a straightforward cover? I don't really have a strong answer because it's not an area that is typically litigated all that heavily. Additionally, you don't see it a ton because you need to pay a set licensing fee to the content creator in order to make a cover. So it's not as though Avril Lavigne has to give this away for free. If Ben Gibbard would ever actually do this for real and record his own version of it, he would have to pay Avril Lavigne a certain number of, you have to pay a licensing fee, so many cents per recording, or so many cents per copy sold, stuff like that. And that's how it would happen. It also it's really difficult in the age of streaming, because when this came out, it was 1975, everything was on vinyl. Maybe 8-tracks were starting to bring, make their way into popular culture. But the idea of streaming, the idea of Spotify or Apple Music or even YouTube was just so beyond what people expected with musical distribution that it really hasn't caught up yet. And I'll be interested to see where it goes. Okay, so that is the stuff you get, right? Congratulations, you have a licensing, or you have a copyright. Here's how you exploit it. Now, how do you know if it's been infringed? Now, sometimes it's going to be incredibly easy. I am making 50,000 illegal DVD copies of Avengers, and I'm going to sell them for $5 a pop down on the street corner of Tate and Spring. Spring Garden Street. Okay, obviously illegal. I use somebody else's song in my car commercial. I don't compensate them for it. Obviously illegal as well. I open my own movie theater and I just download a copy of the latest Fast and Furious movie and off of Pirate Bay, and I put it up on the big screen and charge people $2 to come in, or even $0 to come in and watch it. It's going to be illegal as well. Some of these things are incredibly self-explanatory, and I hope I don't need to explain to you why those would be illegal. Instead, we're going to be talking about more in-between cases. And so what I want you to do, and I want you guys to I really want you to listen here, because I really like this exercise. I want you to listen to these two songs. I want you to listen to the first one, and I want you to listen especially to the beat, and I want you to listen to, or not the beat, I want you to listen to the progression of the bass line, or at least the guitar. I failed AP Music Theory, I don't know. And then I want you to listen to the second one, and I want you to think about what is similar about these two songs and what is different. So, and then I'll probably play it for twice, because I want you to have that kind of ability to contrast it. So we'll go from here.
So why are you upset? I probably sucked more today than anyone in the history of Kung Fu, in the history of China, in the history of sucking. And the 5, man, you should have seen them. They totally hate me. How's Shifu ever gonna turn me into the Dragon Warrior?
All right, that's number one. Now listen to this one, and then we'll listen to both again.
I'm still alive, but I'm barely breathing. Just praying to a God that I don't believe in. 'Cause I got time while she got freedom. 'Cause when her heart breaks, no, it don't break even. The best days will be some of my worst.
So why are you upset? I probably sucked more today than anyone in the history of Kung Fu, in the history of China, in the history of sucking. And the 5, man, you should have seen them. They totally hate me. How's Shifu ever gonna turn me into the Dragon Warrior?
I'm still alive, but I'm barely breathing. Just praying to a God that I don't believe in. 'Cause I got time while she got freedom. 'Cause when her heart breaks, no, it don't break even. The best days will be some of my worst.
All right, so let's list them, right? I want to get into this to the extent that I can. Let's start with the differences, because there are going to be some obvious ones. What are some of the differences between the first song and the second song?
The lyrics or lack thereof in the first one. It's just dialogue.
Yeah, it's Kung Fu Panda. So that's number one. Obviously, the lyrics are whatever. It's going to be different. What else?
The bass is different. Like the second one with the Kung Fu Panda had like drums in it immediately, and then this other one with the script, it's like more guitar. It's just different.
The percussion is very different, right? Yeah, you know, when it comes in, how prominent it is, the levels. What else? The speed is a big one, right? The Kung Fu Panda one is very slow, very contemplative. The script one is quite, even though it's about breakup, very upbeat and everything like that. And Ellis brings up a good point, right? I'm not focusing on does DreamWorks have the ability. Hold on, I got my cat in. I got. All right. DreamWorks very well might have a claim against Beowulf, who made this song and is now no longer on Spotify, and I'm a little curious as to why. But I'm talking about just the script, right, with the music. Anybody notice any other differences?
Could you say the context of the song? Well, the songs are different, or the way the music is used?
The feeling is definitely different, right? Yeah, I mean, like, I really like both songs. I just do. But they're very different in terms of the feeling and the emotion that they were trying to convey, and that's absolutely something to be considered. Now let's talk about things that are similar. Did anybody find things that are similar?
I mean, technically, the track is the same, like just the tempo in which they are presented is different, but it's the same, basic through line musically.
It's the same guitar riff. At least, again, I got a 1 on my AP Music Theory exam. I am not the guy you want to talk to about music stuff. But when I look at it, or when I listen to it, everybody say hi to my cat. When I listen to it, there is definitely similarities. Now the question becomes, did Beowulf infringe on the script's copyright? That musical accompaniment, that sheet music, that recording? And the question is that I'm not sure, because as far as I know, there's not a lawsuit over this. This is just something where I heard the Beowulf version. I'm like, I've heard this before, and went and listened and finally remembered where I'd heard it before. It's the script. Except I played this just like I did with you guys, right? I played it for my wife twice, once, and then back and forth. And she goes, no, I don't think that they're similar at all. And for me, I think that it is absolutely similar, right? I think this is absolutely going to be copyright infringement unless that there's an applicable defense. And it's really interesting, at least to me, how these two, how two people who both were in high school choir and probably have the same level of musical knowledge come to completely different conclusions as to whether or not there was copying involved here. So, but let's look at what you actually need to show in order for there to be copyright infringement. The first thing you need to show is, number one, that if you're going to sue somebody for violating a copyright, you need to be the owner of the copyright. Or you at least need to be the possessor of a exclusive license. So, if I am a big fan of the script and I think that Beowulf has ripped off their song, I can't sue Beowulf. I have no legal authority to bring a claim on behalf of somebody else. Additionally, if I have a non-exclusive license, like for example, if I have the ability to perform it on the radio, but other radio stations have it as well. I can't sue Beowulf either because I have a non-exclusive license. Now, it gets a little bit trickier when we're talking about exclusive licenses, which essentially means I'm the only person in the world who has the ability to utilize the copyright in this particular way, but not very often, and it gets a little bit over our skis to get into the specifics here. Number two, you got to show that the defendant actually copied the copyrighted work, either by direct evidence of the copyright or evidence that shows that, number one, the defendant had access to the original work and the defendant's work is substantially similar to the copyrighted work. You can also show that the defendant's work had a striking similarity to copyrighted work. Striking similarity is going to, we'll get to the definition in a second, actually. And number three, the copied sections of the work are protected by copyright. So let's return on that last point. I want to return to my 10 Things I Hate About You reference, I think a couple classes ago, where 10 Things I Hate About You is a derivative work of Taming of the Shrew. Okay, they took Taming of the Shrew, they took the copyrightable elements, the script, the structure, the characters, and they modernized it. They updated it, and they created their own essential spin-off. Now, the reason William Shakespeare can't sue is because he's been dead for several hundred years, and all of his works are now in the public domain. I also told you that when you create a derivative work, that the producers of 10 Things I Hate About You don't all of a sudden magically get copyright in Taming of the Shrew. The only thing that they get is a copyright interest in the new things they created. So if somebody else wanted to make their own updated version of Taming of the Shrew and instead put it in an office setting or in the military, or do a straightforward adaptation of Taming of the Shrew, well, producers of 10 Things I Hate About You can't sue because the things that are similar between the two projects, the producers of 10 Things I Hate About You don't have a copyright interest in because it's in the public domain. Does that make sense? Do you have any questions about that? It can get a little bit complicated. All right. Sorry, I have a very clinging cat right now. All right, so let's look at some definitions. Number one, you got to show there is something called striking similarity. Okay. Striking similarity is this notion that at a certain point, the likelihood of two things being created independently and being so gosh darn similar that it goes against potential logic. Okay, because again, let's say hypothetically that I write a script, okay, and it has characters and plot and setting and dialogue and all the things that make up all the copyrightable elements that make up a copyrightable script. And somebody else on the other side of the world makes a script that's almost identical, right? Same dialogue just about, same characters just about, same setting just about. Now, if that were to happen, and those two things were actually done independently of each other, and by astronomical odds, me and this other person created very almost identical works, well then there is no infringement there because person A did not copy person B. There has to be copying. It doesn't prevent, the independent creation of a similar work. However, there's this idea that yes, theoretically, if you put enough monkeys in a room and have them with typewriters, that one of them's going to bang out the works of William Shakespeare. But that kind of saying only, it really kind of gets to, it's going to take a very long time because of how, the odds of somebody actually copying the works of William Shakespeare are just so astronomically high. Striking similarity essentially says that when you have two things that were created at different times and are so similar as to preclude the possibility of independent action, copying may be shown without access, because you have to show that the person B was aware of person A's work, and if it's so similar, you can just kind of assume it if you would like to. Now, this is going to be something where you're going to have almost identical works, right? You have articles where just you have some verb conjugations changed or some apostrophes or tenses changed, right? It's the same thing except some very, very minor alterations. What we just saw with Beowulf and the script, or even what we saw with something like Vanilla Ice, probably not going to meet the striking similarity burden. Because even though it's similar, is it beyond the realm of possibility that somebody else would come up with the bass line of dun 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 dun? Not really. I mean, it's not the most original bass line in the world. Okay, now you also can prove it through showing that person B, the person being sued, was aware of person A's work and that they are substantially similar. Now, the tough thing about this is that there is no agreed upon definition as to what substantial similarity actually means. It means whether the defendant took from the plaintiff's work so much of what is pleasing to the ears of the lay listeners who comprise the audience for whom such popular music is composed, the defendant wrongfully appropriated something which belongs to the plaintiff. Essentially, did you make something that sounds pretty darn similar to the point where people are going to hear your version and think of the original song? And think that it sounds like the original song, or think that you ripped off the original song. It's tough, especially when it comes to music, about where you have the line between inspired by something and ripping something off. All right, access. Remember that unless you're going with striking similarity, which is going to be almost impossible, if you want to sue somebody because of a substantial similarity to your copyright work, you have to show that the individual was aware of your work, that they read it or watched it or consumed it in some way, and after that, they created their own work. Some is going to be almost presumed. If you are making a movie, we can all kind of assume you've seen Star Wars, or at least are aware of Star Wars, okay? You're not really going to have a hard time saying, I've never heard of Star Wars. Never heard of Luke Skywalker, never heard of Ben Kenobi. No, it's not going to happen. So the question becomes, if there is, and actually I want to talk about something else with access. You need to show that the individual who created the work had access. So one of the things we'll oftentimes see is writers in Hollywood will just like send scripts to studios, right? I got my great American movie. I'm going to send it to Universal Pictures. And it's going to go into a massive inbox. I'm never going to know if they've seen it, right? I just send it and hope that somebody calls me back. And then 3 years, something that sounds somewhat similar to a script that a writer sent in 3 years earlier comes out. Cowboy Western on Mars, for example. And a lot of these times, these writers will sue saying, look, Universal, I sent you a script or I sent you a treatment with a lot of similar things in there, and you must have read my treatment, read my script, and then rather than pay me money, hired somebody else to create a similar version and you essentially cut me out. Courts have routinely held that the mere receipt of a script or a novel or piece of music by a large corporation or by a movie studio or production company is not enough to qualify as access. You need to show that the writer or the person actually in control of the script or the movie was aware of the work and utilized it to create their own new thing. It's going to be really hard to do. So those lawsuits almost always are going to be unsuccessful. All right, so let's look at substantial similarity. We're going to look at two songs here because it's just easier to do this with music because it's nice and short and all of that. We're going to listen to two songs. In the first video, the two songs are going to be Robin Thicke's Blurred Lines and Marvin Gaye's Got to Get It On. So, no, that's not right. A Marvin Gaye song, which I'm now officially blanking on. So listen to it, and I want you guys to think about what is, again, same thing we did earlier. What is similar, what is different?
Everybody get up.
All right. What's similar? What's different?
In the very beginning, the bass lines were kind of similar.
Yeah, definitely the
Kind
bass
of
line, right? Tempo, pretty similar. Not identical, pretty similar. What else? I thought the percussion was pretty similar. Again, untrained ear. What's different?
One has words and one doesn't. Not a
Well,
lot, I should say.
the Marvin Gaye song eventually does. The words are certainly different. Definitely. It is, the words is going to be a little bit interesting because when you create something musically, courts oftentimes will separate out the lyrical composition and the actual musical composition. Now, the singing, the notes, the melody, the singing is going to be included in the music, but the words themselves is going to be essentially its own poetry. There's a movement that is really interesting. That's been really interesting, where people just look up lyrics, right? I'm terrible at listening to a song and understanding the lyrics, so I'll Google lyrics all the time so I can understand them. That technically, what Genius does or Lyrics Finder does, whatever these other sites do, is technically copyright infringement, because what they're doing is the following: they are taking somebody else's poetry and putting it online without their permission. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So oftentimes they will separate out separate out the written words as a own copyrightable poem, and then will have a copyright in the music. But so to kind of make a long story short, the singing itself is going to be relevant because that is going to be part of the musical composition. The fact that Robin Thicke is kind of doing a creepy song about whatever he's doing a song about, that's not going to be as much. Okay. Anybody think of any other similarities or differences? Who thinks that the works are substantially similar? Okay, Alice says yes. Anybody say yes, no? Maybe you have an opinion? Okay.
Yeah, I think they are. I think they are.
Do you think that Robin Thicke copied Marvin Gaye? What if I told you that during a deposition, Robin Thicke said, "Yeah, no, I love Marvin Gaye. We actually we were listening to that song right before we went back into the recording studio to do Blurred Lines."
Yeah.
Probably not the smartest thing to say.
In that context, yeah.
Right. Because again, remember, it's not so much you need to establish that Robin Thicke copied, right? That they did something wrong. They took Marvin Gaye's work without permission. And that is why a California jury ordered Robin Thicke to pay $7 million and a cut of future royalties and Blurred Lines to the estate of Marvin Gaye. And an appeals court upheld it. So that's example number one. Let's look at another example.
You know what it is? Yeah, y'all know what it is. Yeah, Katy Perry, Juicy J. Let's talk about it. Your boy's been a Christian quite a few years. Victory and faith.
That one is a little bit different. It's a little bit harder to actually. Let me try to see if I can find another one really quick. That was not what I expected it to be. Sorry.
Meals and moments are better with Del Monte. In 2013, the pop
Let's talk about it. Your boy's been a Christian quite a few years. Victory in faith, but I failed in my fears. I heard a lot of
Knew you were gonna come to me. Here you are, but you better choose carefully. 'Cause I'm capable of anything, and everything.
All right, so that was a little bit more difficult because the comparison didn't work as well as I thought it would. So in 2016, Christian rap artist Flame sued Katy Perry for her version for Dark Horse 2013 hit. And really what they were focusing on is that dun 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 dun, but and essentially saying you copied my hook, you copied my intro, you copied my bass line. So they sued, and Katy Perry said, no, I understand it sounds similar, but it's not going to be copyright infringement. And in that case, a jury originally found for Flame, the Christian rap artist, saying that intro that Katy Perry used was substantially similar to the rap album or rap lyric that was in 2008. And a big part of Katy Perry's defense was saying, I'm Katy mother effing Perry, right? I have absolutely no idea who this artist is who sold, a couple of thousand records. I have no idea. You cannot prove access. You cannot, even if I did, even if they are substantially similar, you cannot prove that I was aware of the work and that I copied it. And after a jury found in favor of the rap of Flame, a federal court of appeals overturned that decision, saying no, they're not substantially similar, because if you think about it, they're not really all that identical. Not all that identical, and it's not the most creative hook in the world, right? Again, I'm not a music theory guy, but like the similarities between Robin Thicke and Marvin Gaye are going to be a lot more complex. Like there were multiple things that were similar: the percussion, the bass line, right? The overall kind of sound of it is somewhat similar. Here, they're really only focusing on the dun 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 dun, and so that's why it's going to be considered. At least that's why a federal court of appeals overturned it. Now, for my money, I don't see a ton of difference there, right? For me, and again, you guys are free to disagree. I don't think either one of them is copyright infringement. I don't, because, music is one of those things where it builds upon each other and everybody's influenced everybody else. So I don't personally find them to be all that similar, but I certainly don't think that one is and the other isn't. But feel free to disagree. But that does raise the interesting problem of, are 12 people in a jury box going to be the best indicators of going into somebody's mind and determining whether or not what they created was independent or influenced by, or whether it was copied? It's a really difficult distinction to make, and why I think that a lot of people have looked at the Robin Thicke, as much of a kind of jerkbag as he is, that's a little bit problematic, because it stifles creativity and makes people be really cautious in terms of the types of things they create, and that is antithetical to the First Amendment. All right, so how can you defend against the allegation that you have infringed on somebody else's copyright? Number one, independent creation, right? Defendant can show that he or she independently created the work without copying. Now, in cases where you have things like striking similarity, where it's almost identical, you're gonna have a hard time making that sell, right? Saying that you just happen to create something almost identical to somebody else. But let's take an example of like a script. Something that, you have two things that are not identical, but relatively similar. If a movie comes out, or let's say, we can show that somebody was aware of, or a movie comes out that is somewhat similar to a movie that has already come before. It would not be copyright infringement if the second movie could show that the elements that made up the copyright infringement claim, that they were created beforehand, right? So let's say that movie A came out in 2008, and movie B came out in 2010, and movie A sues movie B saying, look, you copied my work. Movie B can say, look, I understand that they're substantially similar. I'm not even arguing with that, but I can show you notes and scripts and things from 2007, well before I was aware of anything involving your movie that had a lot of the same elements, and therefore is its own independent creation. There has to be copying, even if there's some substantial similarity. Innocent infringer essentially says that it's not total defense, right? Saying that, I thought that what I was doing was okay, but it turns out that it wasn't. Again, not a total defense, but it certainly can reduce damages. And then finally, de minimis infringement, which I find super interesting. And it's a defense based on essentially the insignificance of the violation of the rights of others. Essentially, the court will determine that there was infringement, right? There was a display, there was a copying, there was something that violated the individual's copyright interest. However, it is so small and so trivial that the court's just not going to get involved with it because it's not a big deal. What I want you guys to do is again, we're doing more music because it's helpful. I want you guys to listen to this song, and I want you to listen to the flute. There's a part where it goes, I'm not going to try to do it. That was bad. You'll be able to hear the flute, okay? Listen for the flute, and we'll come back and we'll see whether or not that constitutes copyright infringement.
It's a musical masterpiece. Hear what I'm dealing with, and that's cool at least. What's running through my mind comes through in my walk. True feelings are shown from the way that I talk. And this is me, y'all. I MC, y'all. My name is MCA, and I still do what I please. And I would like to introduce. What's up? I pass the mic to D for a fistful of truth. The name is D, y'all. And I don't play. And I can rock the block party till your hair turns gray. What you saying? Jimmy Walker, Dynamite! And now I'd like to pass the mic to Afro. Come on and do anything you like. I'm the ADOOCK in the place with the bass. I'm going all the way. I can't stop your and if you think that you're slick, you got to break your. Cause I'ma turn it in and I'ma turn it out. But now I got to pass the mic to you. Yeah, on and on and on and on. I can't stop your.
All right, did you guys hear that flute at the beginning? And that kind of repeated itself. Now that's going to be sampling, okay? We've already talked about how sampling can be considered copyright infringement. Vanilla Ice didn't get away with it when he tried it. And it's, there can be an argument that de minimis sampling is a thing, but not when it's the central hook. Where this case is a little bit interesting is that the Beastie Boys had an interest in the recording itself. Remember, when you create a musical work and you record it, you get two separate copyrights. You get a copyright in the recording itself, and you get a copyright interest in the underlying composition. Now, I do not work in the music industry. I don't want to pretend that I do, but my understanding is that more often than not, when you enter into a record deal, the studio that is fronting the money to create the recording will get a exclusive license or even a sale of the copyright for the recording itself, but the artist will retain the interest in the musical composition and the lyrics. And so here, the Beastie Boys went to the record company and said, "This flute thing, it's a song called Choir. We would like that. We think that it has a nice hook. We think it has a nice sound." And the record company said, "Yeah, give us some money. We'll work it out." And they came to an agreement. That's fine. There was a non-exclusive license from the copyright holder for the recording in Choir, and it was sent over to the Beastie Boys. That's fine. No problem there. What happened then is James Newton Howard, the guy who actually did the flute recording, said, "Yeah, you didn't get my permission, and I still own a copyright in the sheet music." Court said that two-toned change, even though it was done with a fair amount of flair, that sheet music that is essentially a step up, a 1/4 or a 1/5 down, is not going to be actionable because it is de minimis. That is such a small part of what makes that song work, is that one change, that therefore it's not going to be considered actionable. So essentially, as long as a court determines that the use is not that important, and the other example that I use is in the background of Seven. If you guys have ever seen Seven, when Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman are going through the serial killer's, like, one of his, like, murder houses or whatever. In the background, there are a bunch of pictures. And a photographer sued, saying, "Look, I noticed one of my pictures in the background of this Seven movie, but it was blurry, it was in frame for about 2 seconds, and it was very difficult to identify." The court said, "No, that's not considered relevant. That's not considered a real taking." And then we have a case called Ringgold versus BET. And Ringgold versus BET, let me give you some background on it. Faith Ringgold was an artist who primarily focused on creating things via quilts. So if you look to the left, it is a piece called Family Picnic. It depicts, Black families at an after-church picnic. Obviously, it's copyrightable, right? It's artistic, it's permanent, it is creative, it is original, right? Copyrightable, right? Absolutely copyrightable. Ringgold even went so far as to get a copyright interest in it. She then sold the quilt. Now, after that, she loses all rights in the ability to sell it on further. So the person she sold it to can sell it for an inflated price or a reduced price. They can give it away. That's fine. However, Faith Ringgold does not give up the right to prevent other individuals from displaying it or performing it without her consent. And BET had a show in there was created a television sitcom whose name I can't remember right now. But BET through HBO, had essentially it's kind of like a Family Matters type, those early 90s sitcoms. And there was a scene where it took place in a church. And in the background of the scene on the wall was Church Picnic, the Molly Ringwald, or not Faith Ringwald, Ringgold tapestry. And she sued, saying, "Look, it is clearly identifiable. It is something that is display, right? It's being open to the public, and HBO is presumably getting some sort of financial benefit from that." Now, I want to make sure I have my notes right on this. The segments of the program in which the poster was visible to any degree lasted between 1.86 and 4.16 seconds. So it was never on screen for more than 4 seconds at a time. And if you added up all the time that it was on screen, it was a grand total of 26.75 seconds out of a 24-minute episode. It was also in the background. The picture that you see is the most clearly identifiable shot where you can see it. And the court said that taking that display was not considered de minimis. What BET did constituted copyright infringement because it was clearly identifiable and the individual retained some sort of economic benefit from it. The show did not succeed or fail upon the existence of this one. Like, it's not, Faith Ringgold's Tapestry is not the thing that is going to make it a hit or not. However, set dressing, production design, these are going to be things in which people get paid a lot of money in Hollywood to do. And so therefore, it is going to be considered copyright infringement. Now, there is no bright line rule that we have with whether or not a copyright infringement is de minimis or not. Instead, it is going to come down to essentially a judgment case on behalf of the court as to whether or not it constitutes more than trivial taking. All right. Now, I want to give a brief introduction to fair use before we call it a day. So we're going to look at this slide. Fair use is going to be the most common defense that is put forward by individuals. Fair use is a defense essentially saying, yes, I took the copyright. I admit that I violated somebody else's copyright. However, due to Section 107 of the Copyright Act, it is permissible under the law. Fair use is defined as an exception to the law prohibiting the unauthorized copying of copyrighted expression for the purpose of comment and criticism. Essentially, it allows the use of copyrightable material for the purpose of something societally good, parody, criticism, news, scholarship, or teaching, or news reporting. It is not necessary that the individual gets interest in a copyrightable work before they utilize the fair use defense. And the Supreme Court has ruled in multiple cases that a work is transformative when it adds something new to the original. It essentially needs to transform it. It needs to create something new for a separate and distinct purpose, which is not always easy to do. And I think that's actually a good place to stop it for the day. What I want you guys to do is I'm going to post a link to a podcast I want you guys to listen to that goes over a case called Acuff Rose v. Roy Orbison. And then we're going to come back and talk a lot about fair use. And just so you guys know, fair use is going to be the subject matter for your final oral argument. So I know we're ending a little bit early, but I think I started right at the dot of 5. So hopefully nobody's complaining too much. Again, be on the lookout for the YouTube update tonight, and I will see you guys on Wednesday. Thanks.